G'day friends and fans, and welcome to Dave Talks of Ukraine War Update for the 6th of November 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, ProWritingAid, Into the Elsbound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire. Part 1 out now, Part 2 coming soon. Thank you to all those who help sponsor the channel. You can sponsor the channel through the links in my link tree. More details at the end of the show. Now, of course, we have reached day 1351 and the propaganda never ends. The Ukrainians, man, they are relentless with their... This is a Ukrainian recruit, obviously a woman, though that's the cleanest submachine. You think she really fired that machine gun? The recoil, yeah, man, the recoil. That's just the propaganda. Although, by the looks of it, you never know. But that's the cleanest recruit I've ever seen on a firing line. You know what I mean? It's just relentless propaganda. And let's just forget about the rest of it, okay? There's nothing really. I'm starting to think that Al Jazeera is not interested in journalism anymore. But Russia has put out an interesting claim, and I'll get to that later, but Pavosk, as you can see, is, we'll get to that, city of Ukraine that's under intense battle. There's been fighting for 21 months. The Russians have gained a foothold in both the central, northern, and eastern parts of the city, according to the Institute of War. And according to most, they captured most of the city, after 2 years of fighting. This was after the fall of Avdiivka. Ukraine sees the defense of the city as critical. As you can see, most of the city is shattered windows. And you see, these are buildings, blown out. These are bunkered down. These are bunkers. These are, in the guise of apartment buildings, they are bunkers built for Ukrainian soldiers to allegedly survive artillery battles. Everybody's asking the question, who designed them and how much was spent and who's paid the bills? Now, recent intelligence alleges that Putin is more than ever to prevail on the battlefield, according to NBC. There's a reason why it's called nothing but crap. Putin has said there's a deal on the table. Ukraine refused. So he said Ukraine is leaving us with no option but to prevail on the battlefield. But they keep claiming Russia was outmaneuvered by Ukraine. According to who? Nothing but crap. But they're outmaneuvered. Yeah. I think the reason why the propaganda works so well is in the initial phases, Russia made 3 strategic mistakes. One, they had raced to, but not surrounded Kiev. They took Kharkiv and then retreated without guarantees that before Zelensky signed the agreement. And 3, they waited too long to relaunch the offensive after Zelensky claimed he needed more time. he was lying to everybody. So 2 million Ukrainians have paid with their lives for Zelensky's lies and the Democrats' ego. Let's face it, the American Democrats, the British establishment, and the European Union have blood on their hands. Now there's fighting in the buffer zones in the north, which seems to be common without, again, however, most of the time there's no advancements to report. Kupiansk, there's nothing to report. As we head north of Lyman, there's only sporadic fighting on the battlefield with nothing to report. The Russian assault forces have again exchanged pot shots with Ukrainians in Zelensky. These are just probing attacks. The real battle is yet to come. I think they're waiting for other battles. Again, pot shots with the Ukrainians hunkered down in Mykolaiv. Basically, there's fighting in the forest between the two. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the siege of Konsk, there's nothing to report yet. The Russians have a foothold. The Ukrainians claim to have cut off their supplies, which is they've carried out a drone attack, but apparently, according to the Russians, the Ukrainians only killed a civilian. Who knows? There's no explosion or anything shown by the Ukrainians, Now, most of this we get no advance, although the Ukrainians' command center Dopelia was hit. Obviously, they waited for Zelensky to leave. Why kill Zelensky? He's the best asset Russia ever has. An incompetent leader is worth a whole battalion on the battlefield. And Zelensky is definitely an incompetent leader who's definitely helping the Russians just by his sheer stupidity and arrogance. They could have held the Russians back, according to many American commentators who all have birds on their shoulders or former colonels and lieutenant colonels who've served in combat, so they know what they're talking about. Say if they held the Russians for 6 months in a forward defensive, instead of going on the offensive, just held the line, they would have only lost half the amount of territory they're about to lose. And they're obsessed with attacking Donetsk is a waste of military resources and hardening the people of these regions against them, which is why the Russians have no shortage of volunteers. Now, most of the volunteers are used to what they call the anti-drone force. Now, if you look at Pavlovsk, they have gained significant. They've gone past the centre. Skob has fallen. This is Pavlovsk. These towns have merged into each other, but look at that. All. Now, according to the Ukrainians, they've somehow cut off the Russian supply lines to Pavlovsk. Could you see anywhere? Where's the Ukrainian offensive? This is a Ukrainian map. Where's their offensive? Where's the Russians? Encircling. They're coming down this road. They're coming up here, through here, and coming round. How are their supply lines cut when you're the ones whose supply lines from here are cut? Okay, Ukraine is now chugging along this road, which we've seen before, comes under fire from Russian ambush drones launched out of Roddy. The Russians control most of Roddy. They've taken parts of Kransk. Now, if you go around the battlefield, they are stalled in places, but they're in Novo. They've taken parts of the town. They're setting up for Hula. So they're setting up for a siege on this corner of this ring right? This ring here. They're setting up. Right, you got the north, south, east, west. Right. Take this out. There's half of the Zaporozhye. What's left is the Zaporozhye, right? We zoom out. Half of Donetsk is under Russian control. A third of Zaporozhye is left, and a third of Kherson is left. Ukraine was offered 2/3. They were offered a bit of land swap, new border along this blue line here, up to here. But they had to surrender most of this, and they just wouldn't. Now they've, of course, drone attacks were launched at Kursk and Sevastopol, and the Ukrainians themselves admit they were failures. Now, Russia has downed dozens of drones in an overnight attack. As you can see here, this is commonplace now for Russians to have Zu-23s with updated modern optical scopes. Now, yes, some of these optics are American, captured from Afghanistan, but Russians also have their own slightly weaker night scope, but they are good enough to spot drones. This is a test firing from a film library. As you can see, it at full auto, it is a spectacular machine gun. The Zu-23 is one of the oldest machine guns in continuous field operations. It's been in dozens of wars since. It was actually designed in World War II. I don't think it saw action. I can't remember. I think the early version of the did. It was based on a German quad cannon. But 75 fixed-wing drones, 49 of those were over Volgograd, 7 over Crimea. They, particularly targeting Kursk and Moscow and other regions. But, Crimea is actually getting less attention now than Moscow. Used to be the other way around. But Russian air defenses are getting better. And they're not wasting missiles. They're using a drum-fed twin cannon. The original Zu was a vehicle-mounted quad cannon. But with improved stabilizers and optics, they don't need to fire as many bullets to destroy a drone. And they are reducing this to a competition, one shot, one kill. How many times they could do a one shot, one kill, The Russians are getting better and better at targeting, and they've made several improvements to their air defenses. But what they've noticed, and is a growing concern, and a lot of American commentators won't admit this, but across Asia, particularly with the independent nations, large amounts of Ukrainian weapons are not allegedly 150,000 units of various weapons have fallen in the hands of civilians in the last couple of years. This is a Security Council meeting, and they've pointed out that, and I think recently there was a raid in Miramar that turned up shoulder-launched weapons from Ukraine that were meant for Ukraine. They had Finnish markings on them, And Finland just goes, that's just an allegation, you know. But it is growing concern, of course, and what is the next target? Kiev is accused of lying about the situation on the ground. Now, the Russian maps are not much different from the Ukrainian maps. But on the Russian maps, most of them don't show as much progress in other areas. But when it comes to Bavorsk, they are up. They are up. They are all but surrounded. They have cut this corner and cut this road. The Ukrainians are allegedly hoofing it through the fields at night. Hold up in here. And like I said, they've attacked the command center at Depilia, which I think was symbolic rather than any military. Let's say it was a military target, but I'm not saying that it was anything that would inch towards the fall of Depilia or anything, rather than symbolic to rattle the Ukrainians' cages. But what comes after the fall of Bavorsk is, as announced by Vladimir Putin, will be Kupiansk. That Moscow is holding Kupiansk off and urging Ukraine to agree to an honourable ceasefire, and that he will allow the Ukrainian troops to leave if they're willing to trade land. But Zelensky is divorced from reality. He says no, and he actually responded by claiming that he is on a holy crusade to conquer Russia and China and urge Europe to join in. This has never been reported by anybody else. Nobody wants to touch that story. Al Jazeera is the only Western media to have reported it. And, of course, they have memory hold it as well. Everybody wants to pretend that Zelensky is a good guy. Come on, folks. He's just another Zoran. Now, claims have emerged from Russians every month about war crimes. Kiev accuses Russia of war crimes. I think every time there's a civilian death, both sides are going to point to it and say it was deliberate. But what we have is a video from a first-person kill that shows that Ukrainian forces indeed did kill civilians trying to leave the city. And they were probably just on food runs or water runs. They're probably coming back. But Ukrainian forces, they're carrying out their orders. They have no guts, it's guts and glory, you know. They can't stand up to the commanders because they get executed. They won't execute their commanders because there's nowhere to run, you know. Hey, if I was part of the trapped troops in Kupiansk, I'd be considering killing all the officers and then surrendering the city, like the Nazis did in Stalingrad. Although it didn't do so well for the German POWs then, but Ukrainians get better treatment than the Russians have treated people in the past. In fact, you could say this is probably the first time in history that Russians have treated POWs with respect. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. The Red Cross is actually in touch daily. They get messages out. Not only a few officers from the Azov battalion have been put on trial for war crimes. Most of the Ukrainians are handed back over time in return for Russian POWs. But it's come to the point where everybody's saying, what's the compromise? Now, the compromise is going to be nobody will be happy, but General Flynn, or Michael Flynn, National Security Advisor, has given an interview and said, on his view on the negotiations, nobody's going to be happy, but we can gather from this that Ukraine, sooner or later, is not going to have American support for anything other than a ceasefire. And Europe, I think the real negotiation is between the US and Europe, not between the US and Russia or the US and Ukraine. I think the real negotiation is getting Keir Starmer, Macron, and Merkel 2.0 to swallow their pride. Really, seriously, they need to be swallowing a drone strike, but we can't have everything, right? We can't have nice things because of the European bureaucrats. The cunts and cowards of Brussels who steal, rob, gaslight, and the cowards of Europe who won't get rid of them. I'm not asking you to kill them, I'm asking you to jail them, okay? Bureaucrats in prison. Bureaucrats for prison, folks. Especially in Britain. The establishment, people have hated the establishment for so long in the UK, yet they won't jail them. Just jail, you only have to jail a few and the rest will start to behave. Trust me, get rid of the trade unions. Reorganise. Okay, organised labour should not be in government, should not be entrenched power for gutless lawyers to rob the working class. Now, thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. But everybody wants too much power, and that's why we have a Ukraine war instead of negotiated settlement in 2022, which would have put an end to Ukraine's troubles. Because Ukraine can't rebuild, okay? It's going to take them 100 years just to get back to 1991 levels. Their economy is pooched. Now, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.